black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to this program, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. We believe here in the Umoja Circle, and I honestly believe that only through dialogue can there be a shift of consciousness. And when there's a shift of consciousness, there's a shift in your worldview. And definitely the people who are in today's society, especially people that look like us, especially young kids, they definitely need a shift in their consciousness in how and who they are. A lot of the things that they are working on, a lot of the information they're working on, and a lot of the things that they think has access to knowledge, like YouTube or TikTok or Facebook and some of these other places, yes, there's a lot of information there, but is that correct information? Again, the purpose of this show is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction. And one of the discussions I've been hearing on the interweb, as I call it, is the fact that whether there were people of African descent or African people here in the Americas before Columbus, that goes back thousands of years. First of all, the answer is yes, but the sources of the knowledge that can prove this actually have been done. The works have been done to prove this, and I'm going to discuss an individual that had done this work. In no sense recreating the wheel. A lot of the sources that I'm seeing, again, I'm seeing people going on YouTube or TikTok for their information. I know there's a need for a lot of brothers and sisters, especially in this age group, the 20-somethings, the 30-somethings, people like Kyrie, who made a mistake based on the sources. But this gentleman, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who I'm going to talk about, has gone with the ancestors. I think he passed in 2009. And that's the shame of it all. We have great scholars like Dr. Van Sertima who dedicated their lives to finding the answers to some of the topics that we're still talking about today. Whether there were African people in the in the Americas. I don't know what the native people called this landmass, but we'll use the European terminology of Americas, And it did interact with the indigenous people. There were people of African descent. If you look at the fact that, according to another great scholar, great scientist, that I'll do another show on, Sheikh Anta Diop, he proved that the earliest human beings were found in the eastern part of Africa, okay? And all the different species that you find, the Australopithecus or Homo erectus, Homo sapiens sapiens, which are who we descend from, the Homo sapiens, what you would call the Neanderthal man, all came out of Africa. And they all spread out. At least 3 of those species, there were 6 different types, and these 3 of them left the continent of Africa and went out into what was the known world hundreds of thousands of years ago. And of course, some of them made it over the land bridge that connected, Europe to what we would call the Americas. And many of them came down there and spread out. Then you had other groups like Asiatic people, and they mixed. Some of them became what we know as the Native Americans. But there were people who had dark skin that were here already, okay? And for thousands of years. The earliest bones found in the Americas is about, 20, 30,000 years ago compared to the earliest bones found in Africa. That's where all humankind come from. and they all, because of the tropical area where it was located, the equatorial area of the Earth where you had UV light, this color skin was the dominant one that came out first. It mutated as you went into other climates or got caught in the ice ages, okay? And all the other human variants that came out. There's only one human species, and that's Homo sapiens sapiens, us. And the earliest forms of us is, going back millions of years, is people that look like me. And people of various different hues of people that look like me. And of course, some of them made it to the Americas. But other groups, other variants of humans, you know, after 40 or 50,000 years ago go by, you got other groups coming that we got the admixture and look like the native people that the Europeans almost massacred 500 years ago. So let's get that straight. It's based on the book I'm going to show you. My discussion is going to be based on the book that's written by that great scholar, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, The African Presence in Ancient America. They came before Columbus. You can find his lectures on YouTube, okay? If you know, I don't want you to listen to me. I want you to do your own discussion. Excuse me. And a lot of the information that I'll be working on. One thing he taught me while I was reading his books and as I studied many of his lectures was the fact that one of the things that the early Europeans did when they went into Africa, into Egypt, when they went into the Americas 500 years ago, one of the things, especially under the rule of the auspices of the Catholic Church, is they burned books. Many thousands of books because they thought they was the work of the devil. They burned the great Library of Alexander, for example, that had thousands and found thousands of ancient scrolls. And some of them were lost and spread out all over the place. Some of them were stolen. There were even ancient scrolls here in the Americas that the Spaniards burnt, okay? So the people, but yet those are the people that were considered primitive. Well, that's the story that was set forth, you know, 200 or 300 years later by the so-called intelligentsia to justify slavery and the annihilation of native people on these lands. There was something that estimated in the Americas, something like 100 million people. Great civilizations, no different. It wasn't, nobody just, you know, people that look like me and the native indigenous people of America, we didn't just wait around for Europe to come and bring us some kind of a light. There were great societies here. But to justify, as Malcolm would say, the established order logic, the history that we've been given, that false history of the fact that it was Columbus who brought here and he brought good things. No, he brought death and destruction, basically. But again, going back to this book that I want to bring forth. Before I even go further, let me let you know who Dr. Ivan Van Sertima is and his credits. He was educated in the world-renowned School of Oriental and African Studies in London, at London University. He's also a graduate of the University of Rutgers Grad School. He was the professor of African Studies there at Rutgers, and he also edited the Journal of African Civilizations. Some of the books that he edited, Blacks in Science, Ancient and Modern, Black Women of Antiquity, Egypt Revisited, Nile Valley Civilization, African Presence in Early Asia, African Presence in Early Europe, African Presence in Early America. He holds a doctorate degree. I would call him a polymath. If you familiar with the term polymath is a person who, even though he might be have one career, but he's good at multiple different disciplines. and he could pull from all these different disciplines and come up with a logical answer to problems. This is what Dr. Van Sertima is, because not only was he a historian, he was a linguist. This man actually did a law degree diary in Swahili. Okay, he was an anthropologist, and he was a literary critic. He was such a good literary critic. A lot of his major writings as a literary critic got him the attention of the Academy of Nobel Commission, in which they asked him to pick people from 1976 to 1980, people who they would nominate. He had the privilege of nominating people for the Nobel Prize in Literature. That's this brilliant man. He was also honored as a historian of world repute by being invited to join UNESCO, United Nations Education and Scientific Commission, that, you know, the UNESCO sites and places like that. They control world history around the planet. They preserve historical sites, or they do kind of research based on history. He was asked by this international commission who were going to rewrite the scientific and cultural history of mankind, okay? Where his contribution to that commission, because he was asked to join the commission to write this massive work, was to focus on the African contribution to the historical, the scientific and cultural history of mankind. He was also asked by the United States Congress when they were dealing with the controversy that was coming up a couple of years ago, maybe back in the 90s, about Christopher Columbus. Was he a hero? Was he a person, according to Native people, more of a to discredit the opinions of the Native Americans? He was asked to, as a witness in front of Congress, to understand what was going on based on the fact that he wrote this book. And based on his testimony in front of Congress, this book here, so this book has been, you know, it's on its 20th edition right about now. That's how many times it's been reprinted. The United States government, based on his what he did and what he said to that Congress, they said that they will not use the term Christopher Columbus discovered America in any of United States document. They would not use that term, that he discovered America, because of the evidence that this brother showed that no, nothing was discovered. There were people here, and he based his research in this book. Okay, I got some more slides that I wanted to show as the evidence that I'm talking about. The next slide. Now, Dr. Van Sertima would be the first one to tell you he's not the first one that said that black people or people of African descent or African people were here in the Americas way before Columbus. Here is an article that was done in 1832 by a Professor Constantine Rafinescu. I don't know if I pronounced his name right, but that's as close as I'm going to be able to get. And read the top part. To many, the facts of old black nations in America will be new. To the fact that, you know, this information will be new. He said that. This is 1832. Yet it's an important feature of American history. I will here merely enumerate the black tribes of which I have found evidence, traces, and remains in North and South America. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but that's how he starts out. This is 1832. And Rafinescu, he was a Frenchman. He was another polymath. He was another one of those folks. This is a picture of Mr. Rafinescu, Constantine. but he was a naturalist. And what's a naturalist? Naturalist is a person who studies the relationship between nature and plants, or nature and animals, and nature and human beings. And that's what a naturalist is. But he had many different disciplines, like all polymorphs. He was great at all of them. And he could pull together different facts from those other disciplines for whatever scientific research he's doing. He was good at that. And he came to the conclusion that there were, black people, African people that were incorporated into Native American societies, and he wrote that article based on his findings. And that's an important thing because, like I said earlier, that the problem that we have today is that a lot of one thing that differentiate what we as people of African descent or people of native lineage have is that when the Europeans came again, especially the Spanish, especially the Catholic Church, they destroyed a lot of documents, a lot of writing by the people who occupied the lands that they took over. They found libraries, they found things that people wrote about their own world, their own experience. Again, like, for example, the Library of Alexander was destroyed by Christians. But the same thing happened here in the Americas. When the Spanish came over, they saw all these scrolls and writings that native people wrote. And there's only, I think right now there's about 4 or 5 books that survived. Yet the same thing happened in Spain after the Moors were kicked out in 1492. You had Carlos Jimenez Castillo, who literally, the Moors were there, and the word Moors comes from Maurice, which is the Latin word, or morai, which is the Greek word, which means scorched. So the Moors were scorched people, just like the Greeks called Ethiopia, or Ethiopias, mean burnt skin. All these definitions are out there that about people. I will be looked at as scorched or burnt skin, okay, by those folks thousands of years ago. And they had names for us. But Carlos Jimenez had 86,000 scrolls burnt. So that's the problem. A lot of books, the Europeans still have their libraries, so they could go to their archives and do their research. But when it comes to the Americas, or when it comes to places like Egypt, there were a lack of books. But one thing I learned from the brother Dr. Ivan Van Sertiman, this great scholar, this brilliant man, he said that you don't, even though that's a problem, he said, but there is history in the bones. That means there's skeletal remains you can find in history. There's history in the architecture. There's history in the natural world, or how the people live. There's history in the culture you'll find. There's history in the anthropology you can find. And he said all those things you must pull together. You just can't go to one source, because as individual items, the established order logic, the people that dominate the narrative that is based on mythology, they will blow it off or not even focus on it if there only is just one area you focus on. That's the problem that Kyrie Irving had, okay? The source that he used had issues, and he had no other backup to prove his point, or whatever idea he had to put them down. That's the problem I have when you use things from YouTube or TikTok. You need to do the research. I hear people say we do research, and then they go to TikTok, or they go to places like Facebook or whoever might be on there, and you get a lot of opinions, not research. This is researched. And not only him, you had other great scholars, but I can't talk about all of them. But I will introduce you as the show goes on. You know, again, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima's book, this brilliant book. One of the things that he also says, again, like I'm going to continue on this theme, is that he was not the first one to say that there were people of African descent or African people here in the Americas that interacted with the native people. I showed you Constantine Ravinescu. I'm gonna move on to another image I would like to show you to prove my point. This is a book made by another white man, Harvard law professor, Leo Wiener. He came from Russia. He came here in America in the 1880s. He's what's called a philologist. A philologist is a person who studied the histories of languages. He was another brilliant scholar, and he taught school at Harvard University. Okay? Now, again, these guys are not African-centered, what we would say pro-black. They just did the research. Leo Wiener, as a philologist who studied the language system, the history of language, found words here in the Native American language systems that he recognized that were words that were in Western African language system. It blew his mind. Because every time these scholars did their research and went back into history, they would find African people in places they are telling us no African should have been. How could these words that were definitely West African by Leo Wiener, who is one of the preeminent philologists, linguistics experts, and this set him on this path of discovery. And he wrote this book, Africa and the Discovery of America. This came out in, I think, the 1920s. And also, the information in this book, I want to show you the next slide. This is the book, the original book, 3 volumes, 1,200 pages of information and proof of African people here in America. This is not TikTok. This is not YouTube. This is not Facebook. If you want to find the information, the research is out there. How come you don't know about these people? How come you were never taught in school? You got to ask yourself this question. Why is it that people who got degrees in college don't know this information and are still arguing today whether there were black people here in the Americas, hundreds of thousands of years before America? Leo Wiener found out. He wrote this book in the 20s. Okay? That's what we have to understand. Now, another person, and I want to show a book by a gentleman named John Boyd Thatcher. Now, who's John Boyd Thatcher? He wrote this book and published it in 1904. And it's a book he interpreted and translated the diaries, the journals of Christopher Columbus himself. Okay? And he put it in this book called Christopher Columbus, His Life, His Work, His Remains by John Boyd Thatcher. And in those books, you can read the journals and the diary inputs of Christopher Columbus, because he translated in English in 1904. How many of you knew about that? You can hear from the man himself, how he wrote, what he thought, how he viewed the native people. And in one of those inserts in his second voyage, in his own diary, in his own words, that's what Dr. Ivan Van Sertima found. He said, don't listen to me, listen to Christopher Columbus himself. On the island of Hispaniola, on his second voyage, Native Americans, before he wiped them out, Native people came to him and said that there were black-skinned people who traded with them, who came up from the south and the southeast and traded with Native people. It's been going on for quite a while. So they've seen black people. Now whether and they were trading these gold-tipped spears, and they had them, and they showed them to Christopher Columbus. He wrote about it in his diary. Now, I'm not saying, and Dr. Ivan Van Sertima is not saying that Christopher Columbus believed them. Nope. But he did one good thing. This criminal. That's how I feel about Christopher Columbus. He said, because the Portuguese, Christopher Columbus, and the Spanish, when they came in contact with the Africans on the west coast of Africa, they wanted gold. So he sent these samples of these spears to Spain, and the metallurgists did an assay on it, and they were shocked because they found that the components of that spear was part gold, silver, and copper in the same proportion that native Africans were doing in African Guinea at that time, because they were assaying gold from all over Africa, because that's why they were going up and down the African coast, you know, especially the Portuguese who got there in the 1850s to 1870s, and they found places like Ghana where you have all this gold. And that's what gave them that gold idea, this idea that Columbus was trying to get to, you know, India and trying to find a way going across the Western Ocean. That's mythology. The Portuguese, and in their archive, there's another book, Born in Blackness, by Howard French, that you need to read, that talks about that they were there. That's why they built those forts that became slave forts, but they were first there for forts like Elmina, which means the mine. They were there for gold. So they won the assay, and they found that these spears that were found in the Americas, that were talked about by these native people, were brought to them by black-skinned people that looked like me from the south and southeast of Hispaniola. Okay, and I'll show another bit of evidence that's going to emphasize that point as we go on with this show. You know, I'm going to continue this on the next show with more evidence. I don't want you to believe me. I want you to follow the facts and the truth as I present them to you. So we have the evidence of the Portuguese having knowledge of the navigational skills of the African people that they came in contact on the west coast of Africa. We have the Africans, the Native Americans, telling Christopher Columbus of African people. We have evidence of Africans in the Americas, and I'm gonna have more evidence as we go on. This is what you do, brothers and sisters. There's people out there who did the work. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So, I'm gonna stop here for now, but until the next show, there'll be more. I just want to tell you, peace, hotep, bye-bye, till next time.